Hello, hello everyone. Welcome to Geeks for Geeks Python channel. My name is Utkarsh Pandey, and today's session is about a topic in Python, which is exception handling, how to handle exceptions in Python. As you would have read from the title and the thumbnail, so the session is all about exception handling in Python. So, today, yeah. So the audio seems to be working. I've checked it. Okay, so we'll begin in a while. Okay, so how this session will go through. First, we will see the course of how we will go through in this session, and then we will get started. So the first thing we will do is we will understand why do we need exception handling. Okay, so if you would have coded few lines in Python, you would have seen that first you write the code and then you run the module, right? And when you run it in the runtime, the script is evaluated, and you also get to know any errors, right, which you might have done while coding, right? It can be any grammatical mistakes, it can be list out of index, right? So these are some common mistakes which programmers make, right, on a day-to-day basis. So when you're doing the development, uh, when you're doing development of any code or any script, then you write the code. The flow is you write the code and then you evaluate it, and then the on running the script you get to know that okay, this is my error, this is something which I've missed, right? So Python tells you right. So this is one scenario where you would have definitely, if you have coded, you would have seen that okay, uh, there are some issues which come and it might happen because of some mistakes which programmer might make, right, while coding. Okay, now the second scenario can be that the development, okay, so we will discuss it on the whiteboard. So I will write errors. Okay, so this is basically, I'm trying to explain you why we need exception handling. Why is it so important? Why do we need exception handling? Okay, so okay, so there are two stages of development of code, right? One is the dev environment. Okay, and so errors can happen in basically these two stages, right? One is when you are developing something, and the second one is when your code goes into production, right? So production environment means your or you can also say deployment, right? Yeah, so when your code is in production or in deployment environment, then also you can have some errors, right? So this can be debugged when you are in development stage, right? When the programmer is writing the code and it is being tested, right, to see if the application is matching the criteria or not. So if when the programmer is in the development environment, he can run the script many times. He basically runs or evaluates the scripts, okay, and then he gets to know about that okay, this error has happened, right? And then he fixes it based on the error message that he gets. He fixes it, so this gets fixed, okay. And after several looping of this thing, that he writes the code, he runs it, evaluates it, he gets the errors, and then he fixes it, okay, then he again adds or writes some code, then again evaluates it, runs it, he gets some errors and he fixes it. Okay, then the code moves to production environment. Okay. Okay, so now your code is deployed, it is running. Now comes your users. Okay, now your users will come, right? Or those who are interacting with the code that you have deployed, right? So they are interacting. Okay, interacting with this code, right? Now users, they don't know how your code is running, right? They have no idea, they just want to use whatever you have deployed. Okay, so users sometimes can give you certain uh, when user interacts with your app, certain conditions might arise which you would have not considered while developing the code, right? So for example, if there's a form, input form, okay, and so let's say you are taking the input, right, input from user, and then you are let's say it is basically multiplication of two let's say it is a calculator. So user writes the expression in this, let's say he writes 8 comma 8 star 5, and then you give the output as 40, right? But let's say by mistake user writes this 1 divided by 0. Okay, so let's say some user came and he interacted with you, he used your calculator app and he gave this input which is 1 divided by 0. If you would have not handled this input correctly, your program would have crashed. Okay, your program was not built to handle such inputs, right? You as a programmer didn't consider this case which is division by 0, right? So if you would have not handled this exception, then your program would have terminated, your app would have crashed, right? And you as a programmer don't want your users to see or face some issue, right, in production environment, because that app is being served to millions or maybe whatever the size of user base might be. So it is being used by millions of users on a day-to-day basis. So you don't want your app to crash when the users give some inputs which you have not handled, right? So there comes the use of exception handling. Okay, so we say that okay, I mean a programmer will definitely try to handle most of it, but if some cases are, you know uh, I mean you can't consider all of the cases, so we say that okay, if some in this part of code, if something out of the box happens, then please just do this. Okay, don't crash, don't uh, don't stop the execution of my program. Okay, I don't want my app to stop at any point of time, even if some out of the box input comes, then also I want my app to give some message to the user that okay, this is not expected input, so please retry with, and give some message that okay, because this is happening. So that basically comes as a part of custom exceptions. Okay, so you can handle basically all the exceptions. Okay, so whenever your script will have some exception, whenever your script will encounter an exception, it will just tell you, okay, and it will skip you. But there are custom exceptions also, that if so custom exceptions as in, so let's say this case which we just discussed, which was division by 0, right? So this case can be handled uh, separately, right? So there are custom exceptions, there are list out of index exceptions, there are key error exceptions, right? So these are custom exceptions. So if your case is directly, if as a programmer you know that okay, in my piece of code uh, I can see a key error exception, or I can face a key error exception when user interact with my code, then you can, okay, right, then you can handle that piece of code with a key error exception. Okay, but there so these are custom exceptions, and then you have in general exceptions where you can just handle anything. So any error, if your program faces any errors, then it will just handle it, and it will not stop the execution of app. Okay, so the very important point that we have in, or the very important use case of exceptions is that it stops your app from being crashed. Okay, so what I'm trying to say over here is, so in this case, when the user enters 1 comma 0, instead of crashing, it will just so you can handle it. Let's say you print some message that division by 0 not allowed. Okay, so it will print this 0, division by 0 not allowed, and then again it will re-prompt the user to enter the input again, so the user can enter 0 divided by 1. Okay, so it's basically an example, right? So that it becomes clear, right? So the important thing is that exceptions helps in handling out of the box use cases, or interactions, I would say, when user interacts with the app. This is where it finds its main use. Okay, you can also use so user interacts with your with your piece of code, with your piece of code. So you can use exceptions even in your development environment, but the main use case comes when you are in production environment, right? So because in development environment, you are only are responsible for seeing your code, right? You are developing it, it's in front of you, you can just run it anytime, whatever times you want to run it, and then you can fix everything, right, based on the error messages you get, right? But in production environment, you don't have this you don't have this flexibility, right? You can't do this. So, and users can interact in n number of ways with your piece of code, right? So you don't want the exceptions to crash your app. Okay, so that is the basic usage of exception handling. Now we will see some examples. So the flow is basically, we have discussed how exceptions can be occurred in when you write some piece of code, and how you can handle it, and why do we need to handle. The most important thing to understand over here is why, in which situations we need exception handling. Okay, so now the flow is basically, we have seen the explanation part. Now we will jump to some code examples, and we will try to implement some cases where you might see exceptions. Okay, okay, so this is my editor. So let's take example of let's say I'm reading a file. Okay, so if you see on my right hand side, there is this text file. Okay, the file which I want, .txt. Okay, so let's try to read. So basically, let's say I'm trying to read some file. Okay, so you can basically see this example as when you are trying to open some file, when a user is trying to open some file, right, from their app or something on website. So then you can treat this example as that particular example. Okay, so let's try to uh, open this app. Okay, let's try to open this file. Okay, so first what I'll do is, so when you open any file, you have to be in the same directory. Okay, so I'm in the same directory. I mean, where I'm in the same, I'm writing this file, which is fileerror.py, in the same directory where this text file is located. Okay, okay. So after doing this, the command is basically with open as a variable. So in the open uh, in the open function, you have to give the file name. Okay, so let's suppose I gave the file which I don't want, let's say. Okay, let's say I've given this name, okay, and I say that open it as a variable f, okay, and then I want to just see the contents or the lines in the file. Okay, so for line in f, because if f is my file object which open function returns, so I'll just print the lines in my file. Okay, as simple as that. But my file name is the file which I want, the underscore file underscore which underscore I underscore want dot txt. So I have named it incorrectly, right? Because I have written I don't want. So let's just execute this. Sorry, let's just execute this. So this is my directory. So I'll just move to my code directory, cd desktop, cd tutorial. Okay. Okay, so let's see if my file is currently present in the directory. So the file is fileerror.py. Yes, it is present. So I'll give py file error.py. Okay, and if when I executed this script, it is giving me an error, right? So what is the error? Let's see the component of the error, how errors are given by the Python. So first it is giving some trace back, okay, and it is saying most recent call last, okay. So that basically means that from where the main issue is happening, that is basically defined in the last part, okay. So as you can see, uh, file error.py line 1, and the module is open module, right, with open this as f, okay. And now this is the description of the error, which says that file not found error, no such file or directory, okay. So it is saying that there is no such file with name the underscore file underscore which underscore I underscore don't underscore want dot txt, right? So yeah, so that this is basically how you get errors, right? I have not handled it as of now. I have just made a mistake. I'm just showing you how we basically make mistakes in reading and writing, and how we make grammatical mistakes, right? Not particular to reading and writing a file, but how we make grammatical mistakes. So you can see that I made a grammatical mistake and it gave me an error, and the execution of the program also halted, right? So let's just fix this name to the correct name. Now I have written the file which I want .txt, right? So now it is correct. Let's run it once again to see if the error disappears or not. Okay. Okay. So again I'll run, and now there is no error, right? So I have fixed the correct file name, which is the file I want.txt. Now the error disappeared. I executed the file and it's saying message from the file. So this is the content of the file. If I open the file and if you see, it contains a single line which says message from the file, hello from the file world known as file IO. Please open me only when you spell it correctly. Okay, so the file is giving a proper message, and it's saying that hello from the file world known as file IO, or this is just a message, and it is saying please open me only when you spell it correctly. Okay, so this is the content of the file, and when we correctly executed when we executed with the correct name, then the file got opened, right? And yeah, okay, so we have seen how basically we wanted to open a file, and when we made a grammatical mistake, it didn't let us. Okay, now this if you see the code I had, so my program was basically to just open a code, to just open a file and loop into it and just print the line. Okay, as simple as that. And after that the execution of the program terminates, okay, because I don't have anything which the script has to do after it opens the file. Okay, so it's done. It prints the content and that's done. That's basically we just wanted to see how errors are incorporated. Okay, now let's take a case where I am executing I am executing something in a while loop. Okay, so my first statement is that while true. So this means whatever I'm going to write inside this is gonna execute, right? And it's gonna execute again and again and again, right? Because the first statement is while true. So your program is just running continuously, right? And uh, there can be many instances. So basically this is like mimicking a production environment. Okay, so in production environment, your website or your app or anything, your APIs, they are hosted in production environment and they're running in while loops, right? They are continuously looking for requests and everything from users, from page requests. The server keeps responding to them, right? So that's what I'm trying to mimic over here, okay, with this while loop. So let's say that I take an input from user in while loop and I'm asking that give me the file name which you want to open. Okay, so I am doing essentially the same thing, but you will see gradually and eventually that okay, so with open file underscore name, so file underscore input, right? And the mode is read, right? So these are the parameters for open function as if. Okay, I'm doing basically the same thing, but the only change is that I'm executing everything in while loop, right? Okay, so I print that uh, just a minute. So before opening, uh, yeah, so after it opens, I print uh, file opened successfully, right? Successfully, and content. Okay, so I can't close here. Content starts next line. Okay, so this is I'm printing. Let's zoom a bit. Yeah, okay, so this is fine. Okay, so now I'm looping in the file object. Okay, so for line in F, okay, I'm printing the line. Okay, okay, let's execute this. So if you see, the only changes I've made is I'm executing the same code but in while loop. Okay, so that basically mimics the production environment where it's running continuously. Okay, so now it is asking me for an input, so I'll just copy the file name. Yes, I'll copy the file name, I'll give it as input, and okay, so it's not .py, it's .txt, right? Yes. So now it says that file opened successfully, content starts from next line, and it is printing that message from file, which is the which is the content of the file, right? Now it is again, now if you see if you compare from the previous example, the code hasn't terminated, right? It is still running and it is still giving me the output. I mean, it is still asking me for input, right? Because I've put everything in while loop. So again, if I give the same thing, again, if I give the same file name, it will print, it will open and it will print again. Okay. Okay. So we have seen till this, but let's say this is my production environment. Okay. And I'm the user and I don't know how to interact with this. Okay. So I have not given any uh, basically name, right? So I have not given the correct name. so the correct name was the file which I want .txt. So let's say I miss .txt and I press enter. Okay, so then it prints that this file was not found, right? And it terminated my app. If you see my app has stopped. I was in the while loop, but since I didn't give the correct name of the file, it terminated the app, right? And my app is stopped now. I cannot reuse the app, right? Because the execution has stopped and an exception has occurred which I haven't handled, right? And if you don't handle the exception, your app will just crash, right? Even if it was in while loop, then also it crashed, right? And you cannot use the app, right? So how can I get rid of this situation? Okay, how can I get rid of this situation where if the user doesn't gives the correct file name, then my app should not terminate, even though it will not be it will still not get the file content, right? But I don't want my app to crash. It to prompt I want it to go and prompt again and ask a new input, okay, by displaying them some message that okay, this file was not found and you have to give the correct file name, right? So I want my app to give them the message and be in the execution state. Okay, I don't want my app to crash. So for that, I will put a try. Okay, I will put a try and I will put everything which I want to test. Okay, so I will put this print. Yes, so let's get rid of this print statement. Okay, so now I will put everything inside a try block, where I think that there is a possibility of an error. Okay, so because here I'm asking the input. Okay, so that input is stored in file input. But in this line, I'm opening that file with that file input name, right? So I'm hoping that if the file input name is incorrect, then there will be some error, right? So that is why I am placing it inside the try loop. Okay, so now this, and then so try will basically just check for any exceptions. Okay, and how do I handle? I write except print that something so because it can be file name incorrect, please try again. Okay, so I have used try, and except is where you write something when the exception has happened. Okay, so when an error occurs in these statements, then just print that the file name was incorrect, please try again. So let's execute this app again. Okay, so now I will give the same command .txt and no exception happened. Okay, so it's returning the content of the file. Okay, now let's say I gave the file name correctly, but I missed the .txt. Okay, so now it is printing file name incorrect, please try again. So if you see, my program is still running, right? I can still give the input, so it has not crashed, right? If I give this name again, if you compare it from the previous case where the program got terminated, so now it is not terminating. I can still give the input to my program. Okay, and since it gave me this message that file name incorrect, please try again, so as a user I'll give the correct file name and I'll again get the content of the file. Okay, if you want to, so this is basically the basic case where you have try and you have accept and you just want to handle that. So this is the basic case. If instead of printing some random message, you want to give the user the exact error, you can write except exception as E. Exception as E. Okay. And then instead of this statement, so E contains my exception message. Okay. So instead of printing something else, if you want this, if you want the exact exception message, then you can handle it in this way: except exception as E, print E. So now let's execute the file again. Okay, so Python file error. Now if I give some incorrect name, so now it is saying, now instead of printing file not found error, now instead of that message, it is correctly printing the exact error, right? And the error is file name incorrect, please try again. Okay. Okay, so it is saying no such file or directory. Okay, no such file or directory, file name incorrect, please try again. So this is basically the input that I gave. So it is saying this input, there is no file that exists with this name. Okay, so this is how exceptions work. Okay, now we will see we have seen that how to use try with only except, and if you want the exact error message, you can see except exception as E. Okay. Okay, so now let's go one step further. Okay, and okay, so we will execute something. So I will give you an example. We will execute an API. Okay, so this is the Zippopotamus API, where basically you have you can get based on country and postal code, you can get nearby places information. Okay, so this is the website and this is the documentation. So if you see, this is the for let's say for India. Okay, let's say for India, the API is api.zippopotamus.us/in/. So this is the URL, and then when you use this URL, you can get basically in India for postal code 110001, you can get all the nearby places to that. Okay, so let's say we are trying to create an app where we want the nearby places which are there for any postal code, right? So let's implement that and we will see how we can incorporate errors and everything in that. So import request, import, I will import my modules, import request, import JSON. Now if you see the API, you need the country code which is the IN, and you need the zip code. Okay, so I am taking these two parameters as input from user. So country is input, and then pin code is the input. Okay. Okay, so now I will define a function where I will call get locations for pin code by country. Okay, so this is my, it's just a fancy name for my function. Okay, and it will accept pin and country as pin code. Yeah, so it will take pin code, pin and country, okay, as two parameters. Okay, so now I'll take URL with parameters. So if you see the documentation, the base URL is api.zippopotem.us. Then comes the slash country name, then slash country code, right? So I will take URL with parameters equals, I will copy this URL, which is this much. So in a string format, this much, api.zippopotamus plus this, and then I will add slash to that string. Then I will add what I need to add? Country, right? So country, and then again I'll add a slash. So plus slash, and then plus what do you have? Pin. The next is pin, right? So this is my URL. Okay, this is my URL which I want to hit. Okay, and now the response is equals to request, my request library dot get. Now this is basically you are hitting a URL. Okay, it's like you are hitting a API, so it's a get request, right? And in the get parameter I'll just pass my URL with parameters. URL with parameters I've passed in, and I want it in a JSON format, so I will get response dot JSON. Okay, so this will basically convert the response into a JSON format. Okay, now let's say so when user is interacting, so he can give some wrong pin code, right? So you don't want them to enter wrong, I mean you don't want them to see a crashed application. Okay, so that is I mean it will not crash, but if you want to handle that case, right, where a user, so a case might arise where user will give some incorrect pin code, right? So you want to handle that. So try, so that's why I'm putting try. Value is, now I'm creating a response. Okay, so I'm giving message, so this is my dictionary, message is 200. Okay, so 200 in APIs means okay. Okay, and then I am giving a key which is results. Okay, and in this I will give response of places. Okay, and I will give ERR again one more key which is ERR. So this ERR key will basically give any errors. Okay, this is the error key, and here I'll give none. Okay, so this is the case. So the try will basically check for this. Okay, if there are any errors in this or not. So whenever my pin code is correct, your response will be correct. Okay, your response JSON will be correct, and in the response JSON object you will have this key which is places. Okay, so when the URL is correct, pin code is correct, everything is correct, then you will not have any errors in this line, because you will be able to find this places key in the response object. Okay, but when the user is not giving the correct pin code, your response will be an empty thing, right? It will not be populated with the correct data. So when it will be an empty thing, you will not have this key which is places in the response object. So then it will throw an error, right? Because it will throw an error that the key is not found. Okay, but you want to handle that, you want to handle that case. Okay, so in the same line, so I'm putting, I have not used try with these three statements. Why? Because I want users to execute. I want users to execute for every pin code. Okay, if I execute try statement with this request response only, then it's of no use, right? Because response will always be generated. That API will always is always responding to you, right, based on the pin code. So but the thing is that for incorrect pin codes, or for the pin codes which is not covered by that API, the response objects will be empty. Okay, so for that cases I want to handle. Okay, so that is why I'm putting the try block for this statement, where it is creating the final object which I want to return. Okay, and in that case, where error will happen? Error will happen in creating this response places. Okay, because for incorrect pin codes, your response will be an empty object, and in empty objects it will throw an error that places key does not exist. If the pin and everything is correct, then it will return, it will be able to find this places key, and this value object, this value dictionary will not have any issues. Okay, so json.dumps my value. Okay, so now json.dumps is basically, again, it is creating a string uh, out of a JSON object so that it can be printed onto it websites and stuff. Okay, so we are not doing that, but we are definitely will implement everything which is the standard. Okay, now except key error, I am using key error. Okay, so as we discussed, we had the case where you can handle almost all exception, which is basically try except. Okay, but if you want to handle any custom exceptions which we discussed in the starting, that you can also handle divisibility by zero exception separately, you can handle key error separate exception handle, you can handle list out of index error uh, differently, right? So separately. So that is what we want. Okay, because I know that the most common error that I'm going to get out of this is key value, key not found error, right? So that is why I have put it in a try catch. And if I'm saying if key error happens, then do this. Okay, so do this as in I will still create my value object, but I will populate it with some different results because my response is not available, right? So I'll give them message 400 because 200 is for successful and 400 is basically for some error or something. And then I will give results. I will give an empty list. Okay, results is basically empty list, right? Because for that pin code is not covered. And then I'll give ERR, which is the error message, and I will say that pin code not pin code incorrect. Okay, pin code incorrect, because country is basically, it has to be India, right? I'm assuming that they will use India. Okay, but if you are sure that okay, this they might have had entered different country, you can handle that as well, right? And then I'll just return JSON dot dumps, and again I'll pass the value thing. Okay, so this is okay. So what we have done in this, we created the URL which we want to hit. Okay, as defined in the documentation. For India, it is api.zippopotamus.us slash the country slash the pin code. Okay, so api.zippopotamus.us, and country and pin code I've taken as an input from user. I've passed into this function. So I have appended country slash pin. Okay, so my URL is complete. Then I get the response by placing a get request from the request module, and I convert that response into JSON object, and then I create the final object which I want to return to my users. Okay, the basically what I want to return, the nearby places, right? So I take the response, I take the places key from the response object, from the response JSON object, and take the message as 200. But I'm not sure that, because the user might enter some different pin code which will not be covered. So then I know that okay, this places sometimes my response will be an empty thing, so this will raise a error. Okay, but I want to handle them, so that is why I've created a try catch block, try and except block. For try, I execute the value thing in my try block, and I return. If no error happens, then just return this. It will not go into except error because error has not happened, right? But when the error happens in this case, then it will not execute this return.dumps. It will basically skip it. Okay, so this is very important thing in try. In which whatever So let's say I write one more line, which is a equals 5. Okay, so as soon as the try block experiences an error, as soon as an error happens, then all the next lines will be skipped. Okay, and it will straight away go to the except block. Then a equals 5 will not be executed. This return json.dumps value will not be executed. Value, then whatever is inside except will be executed. Okay, and if no error happens, then except will not be executed, and all the statements in the try block will be executed. Okay, so this is, so whenever there is any error, it will go straight to except, and when there is no error, it will execute both these value and return statements. Okay, so now let's just execute our function to see what is happening. I will like copy this function name, and I will pass these two parameters. Okay, so okay, there is one thing, this is not a, this is a variable, country is a variable. Okay, so I will remove the commas from there. Okay, so API plus slash plus country plus slash plus pin. Okay, so in okay, so now I will pass my, the first parameter that I need to pass is pin code, pin code, comma country. So this pin code and country are these two variables. Okay, which I have taken from the user. Okay, okay, and then what I'll do is I'll print a, save it. Now let's run it to see what is happening. Okay, so it is asking me for country, so I'll give India as input. Next line, it is asking me for pin code, so let's try with a correct pin code, which is 110001, which is in Delhi. Okay, so it is saying invalid URL. Okay, so I am missing HTTP thing. I also need to provide HTTP slash colon. Okay, so now it looks correct. This is the exact URL, HTTP colon slash api.zippopotem.us, then slash plus country plus pin. Okay, so I've saved it. Let's run it again. So let's give country as India. Let's give pin code as 11. I'll just zoom in a bit. Yeah, so this is, so this is my country, and pin code is 110001, which is in Delhi. Let's run it, and it gives me this response. Okay, so for country India and pin code 110001, these are the places which are nearby. Okay, so it is giving me this value. It is returning me this value dictionary as a object. Okay, as a string. Okay, so in the string, so this value is basically like a JSON, like a dictionary with key and values. But when JSON is when I use JSON.dumps and inside that I pass a dictionary, it becomes a string. Okay, so that this is the standard way in which you return some things to a website for purpose of display on websites. Okay, so that is why it is converted into string. Okay, so it is returning message is 200, which is this key, message is 200. Then the next key is results. So the next key is results, and this is a list. Okay, and inside this list we have different dictionaries, and those dictionary contains the place name, which is, let's say for Delhi, this pin code. Janpat is one of the place, then Rail Bhavan is one of the place, then Connaught Place is one of the place. Okay, then Sansadya Saudha is one of the place, then section north is one of the place, then you have Constitution House, you have Eastern Court, and then you can read all of these places, right? And then at the end, the last key is after the places dictionary is after the result list is ended, then you have this last key, which is error, which is saying none. Okay, that means that no error occurred while returning this response. Okay, let's run it once again, and let's try to enter some incorrect code. Okay, so I'll give country name as India, and let's say I give pin code 208006. Now this pin code is not covered by the Zippopotamus API, so it will definitely return an empty response. but we don't want that. And when it returns an empty response, it will go into error, right? Because then it will not find this places key in, right, in the response object. So you can print and check. So if I do this, yeah, so now it is returning message is 400, results is a empty list, and the error is pin code is let's say we don't want incorrect, we will write pin code not covered. Instead of writing pin code incorrect, pin code is correct, right? But it is not covered by this hippopotamus API. So let's run again, India, and then 208006. This is not covered by hippopotamus API. That means it will not have any response for this pin code, right? Okay, so it prints that message is 400, results is empty, and pin code is not covered. Okay, pin code is not covered. So now, because in the response it is not able to find this key, which is places, so we occurred a key error. So then when the key error occurred in this line, we jumped to except block. It skipped this return json.dumps. Now this value with message 200 and error none will be skipped. Now value will have message 400, error will be pin code not covered, and results will be an empty list, right? And then it is returning this thing. Okay. Okay. So let's run it once again with the correct code. Let's try something else this time. So I'll execute the file again. Give India and 110002. Okay. Let's try this. And it is giving the result, okay, because this pin code is correctly handled. This pin code is handled by hippopotamus API. Okay, so the places name are Daryaganj for this pin code, which is in Delhi. Okay, so all these parameters are there. Place name for the latitude, longitude for that place, state abbreviation, and the latitude. Then you have Rajghat Powerhouse, then Ansari Road, right, Ajmeri Gate extension. All these places are near the pin code 110002, right? Okay, so I hope that you would have seen the use cases of exception handling in this. We saw how exceptions can be useful in production environment, how it basically helps us to convey the correct information and convey the correct message to the user when they make some mistakes, or use when the user uses our code in such a way that it generates something which is not which our code is not able to give, right, which our code is not able to give them back. So then in those cases we need exception handling, and we need to handle exceptions so that our program doesn't terminates, and even if it terminates, it doesn't gives them the incorrect results or the incorrect messages, right? We need to handle them with the exception handling, so that even in this case, if you see, if we would have not returned, if we would have not handled this key error, let's say this is an API, okay, and let's say if we would have not handled, then that API would have returned some error message, okay, which is of no use to the user, right? So when you handled it correctly, then you created a new object, and which basically said that your pin code is not covered. So the user will get an information from this message, the error message, that okay, this pin code is not covered. Let's try with some other pin code. If you give some random error messages from Python, then it's of no use to Python. It's of no use to user, right? The user will not be able to understand what is this. So you have to handle these things correctly in your applications. Use exception handling with try and except. Use custom exceptions so that your code runs fine and the user is prompted to correct messages. Okay. So I hope you learned something new out of this. We discussed how to hit an API. We also discussed different how to create URLs by taking parameters from from user. Okay, and then we also saw how to make a GET request Okay, we saw how to create an object, JSON object of the response, and then we also created our custom responses. We handled some exceptions which our program might have encountered, and then we handled those, and we returned the proper results with the proper messages. Okay, so I hope this session was useful to you in some way or the other. I would recommend you to read about these topics and discover further. And if you have any doubts, any questions related to this session or related to exceptions or related to Python in general, you can just leave them as a comment and I'll try to get them. I will try to answer all of them and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Okay. So that's pretty much all from today's session. I will see you very soon in the next one. Until then, stay safe and take care. Okay. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.